CEO's daughter took over my role and hired her fiancé until he erased the company's biggest contract. They say you never see the knife coming. In my case, it was an email, a calendar invite titled Transition Meeting from Alessandra Marlowe, daughter of my boss and, as of 3 days ago, the new CEO of Marlowe Dynamics. I stared at my phone, coffee halfway to my lips, as commuters rushed past me on the crowded sidewalk. 8 years of my life building this company, and I learned about my fate through an Outlook notification. Transition meeting? My assistant Lily asked, peering over my shoulder. What does that mean? I shrugged, but my stomach twisted. We'll find out in an hour. The truth was, I already knew. Richard Marlowe had announced his retirement last month, surprising everyone by naming his 29-year-old daughter as his successor. Alessandra, who had spent more time on yachts than in boardrooms, was suddenly my boss. I had been the director of global strategy for 8 years, the architect behind our expansion into 17 countries. But blood is thicker than accomplishment. As I strode through the glass doors of our headquarters, I noticed people averting their eyes. The whispers stopped when I entered the elevator. My executive assistant handed me a coffee without meeting my gaze. Is there something I should know, Carmen? I asked quietly. She hesitated. They cleared your calendar for the rest of the week. I nodded slowly. I see. My corner office, the one with the view of the bay that I'd earned after bringing in the Zurich account, suddenly felt borrowed. I ran my fingers along the spines of strategy books on my shelf, looked at the award for Business Innovator of the Year that sat on my desk. 8 years of 4 a.m. calls to Asia, missed birthdays, a broken engagement because the company needed me more. When my phone buzzed, I was already standing. Alessandra was ready for me. Her office, formerly Richard's, had been redecorated in just 3 days. Gone were the vintage maps and leather chairs. Now everything was white, cold, with abstract art that probably cost more than my annual bonus. Julian, she said without rising from behind her massive desk. Thanks for coming. As if I had a choice. Alessandra? I replied, noticing the man standing by the window. Tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that screamed Italian craftsmanship, dark hair, perfect smile. He turned to face me, and our eyes met. This is Damien Wolf, Alessandra said, her voice softening when she spoke his name. My fiancé. I didn't know she was engaged. Then again, I wasn't invited to her social circles despite working alongside her father for nearly a decade. Nice to meet you, I said, extending my hand. His grip was firm, his smile not reaching his eyes. Likewise, I've heard so much about you. Somehow, I doubted that. Julian, Alessandra continued, finally looking up from her laptop. We're restructuring the global Salergy division. She didn't say your division. Already distancing. We need fresh perspectives as we move forward. Damien has experience in European markets that aligns with our new vision. I almost laughed. I had personally opened our London, Berlin, and Milan offices. I spoke 4 languages. I had personally secured the Zurich account, our largest client, worth 40 million annually. What kind of experience? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling inside me. Damien smiled. Private equity, venture capital. I've helped several companies navigate difficult transitions. Vague, non-specific, and surely nothing compared to my track record. I see, I said, turning back to Alessandra. And where does that leave me? She finally had the decency to look uncomfortable. We're offering you a lateral move. Special Projects Division. Special Projects doesn't exist. It will now, she said, sliding the folder across the desk. With you at the helm. I didn't touch it. Special Projects was corporate speak for we don't want an age discrimination lawsuit. A holding pattern until I resigned out of boredom or frustration. I've built your European division from nothing, I said quietly. The Zurich account alone will be in good hands, Damien interrupted. Change can be difficult, Julian, but it's necessary. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. There was a falseness to him, like looking at a photograph that had been subtly altered. I'd like some time to consider, I said, finally taking the folder. Of course, Alessandra replied, relief evident in her voice. Take the week, but we'll need your decision by Monday. I stood, nodded, and walked toward the door. And Julian? She called after me. This transition will happen regardless of your decision. I hope you choose to be part of it." I didn't respond. Back in my office, I opened the folder. The special projects role had no team, no budget, no specific responsibilities. Just a lateral salary and a smaller office on a lower floor. My phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Security has requested your building key. Standard protocol for transitions," they said. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the bay. 8 years, I had missed my father's funner because of an emergency board meeting. I had delayed having children because the company needed me focused. I had sacrificed everything. And now I was being transitioned by a woman who had never worked a day in her life, and her too-polished fiancé, whose credentials seemed as substantial as smoke. I began packing my personal items into a box: photos, awards, the business card from my first client. As I reached for the strategy books, I paused. Behind them was a small notebook, my record of contacts, connections, and confidences shared over countless business dinners. I slipped it into my pocket instead of the box. They might take my office, my title, my team, but my network, my knowledge, those were mine. And something told me I would need them. Because there was something wrong about Damian Wolf. Something beyond the typical corporate backstabbing. The way Alessandra deferred to him, the vagueness of his background, the timing of it all. As I walked out that day, box in hand, I made a decision. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a different one. 2 weeks after my unceremonious departure from Marlowe Dynamics, I found myself sitting in a coffee shop across the street from my former office building. Some habits die hard. I still woke at 5 a.m., dressed in a suit, and pretended I had somewhere to be. Today, that somewhere was a worn leather chair with a view of the life I no longer had. "Third time this week?" said the barista, sliding my Americano across the counter. "Stalking an ex or just missed the view?" I smiled tightly. Something like that. From my vantage point, I could see the sleek company cars arriving, watched familiar faces hurrying through the revolving doors. At 9:15 exactly, a black Tesla pulled up. Damian Wolf stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks. A man who looked like he belonged on the cover of Fortune magazine. But something about him nagged at me. In 8 years of international business, I'd met thousands of executives. I could place accents, recognize alma maters, identify common connections within minutes. Damian was a blank slate, too perfect, too manufactured. My phone buzzed. Carmen, my former assistant who had quit 2 days after my reassignment. "You busy?" she asked when I answered. "Depends on who's asking." She lowered her voice. "HR is scrubbing records. Digital only, nothing on paper. They're calling it standardization, but they're focusing on executive credentials. Damian's background, among others. But most of the redactions are for him." She paused. "Julian overheard him on the phone yesterday. He mentioned the Zurich account, said something about necessary restructuring." My blood ran cold. The Zurich account was our financial backbone. A deal I had personally negotiated over 18 months of relationship building. If Damian was messing with that, "Thanks, Carmen. Send me anything else you hear." After hanging up, I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. What did I actually know about Damian Wolf? Expensive suits, no identifiable accent. Engaged to the CEO's daughter after what must have been a whirlwind romance, since no one at the company had heard of him until the engagement announcement 3 months ago. I started with the basics: LinkedIn, social media, industry publications. His profile claimed he'd worked at a private equity firm called Archer Global for 5 years, then as an independent consultant for 3 more. His education: MBA from NSAID. Impressive, if true. But something felt off. His LinkedIn had been created only 8 months ago. His connections were sparse for someone supposedly well-established. No recommendations. No detailed work history. Just vague accomplishments with no specifics. I made a call to Meera Patel, my former classmate, who now ran executive recruitment for a competing firm. "Julian, darling, please tell me you're finally ready to jump ship. I have 3 CEOs who would fight to have you." "Not yet," I said. "I need information." Damian Wolf claims he worked at Archer Global in London. "Insid grad, supposedly." "Never heard of him," she replied immediately. "And I know every inside grad worth poaching in the last decade. Could you make some calls? Discreetly?" She laughed. For you? Absolutely. But you owe me dinner at that Japanese place you're always bragging about. By evening, my coffee table was covered with notes. Mira had called back within hours. No record of a Damien Wolf at NSAD in the last 15 years. I'd contacted 3 former colleagues at competing firms who specialized in European markets. None had heard of him. Archer Global existed. But their HR department had no record of his employment when my friend pretended to be verifying employment history. A man emerging from nowhere, with credentials that dissolved under the slightest scrutiny. My doorbell rang at 8 p.m. It was Beth from HR, the only person besides Carmen who had bothered to say goodbye when I left. "I shouldn't be here," she said, looking nervously over her shoulder as she stepped inside. "What happened?" She handed me a USB drive. "Damien asked me to purge these from our secure server. Said it was outdated information that might cause confusion with our new direction." "What is it?" "Your files, strategy documents, client histories, contact information, everything you built for 8 years. I made a copy before deleting it." She looked down. It didn't feel right. I stared at the small drive. Why would he want these erased? "I don't know, but that's not all." She lowered her voice. "I processed his Fevins paperwork. The background check came back with flags. 3 different social security numbers in 5 years. My mind raced. "Did you tell Alessandra?" Beth laughed bitterly. "She signed the override personally. Said it was a clerical error." She looked at her watch. "I have to go. I've already said too much." After Beth left, I plugged in the USB drive. 8 years of work, contact lists, strategy documents, financial projections. But one folder caught my eye. Zurich, confidential. Inside were emails between myself and Victor Roth, the CEO of Helvetica Financial, our biggest client. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. "Julian?" Victor's Swiss-German accent was unmistakable. "It's been too long." "Victor? Sorry for calling after hours. Quick question. Has anyone from Marlowe contacted you recently about restructuring your account?" The silence on the other end spoke volumes. "Yes," he finally said. "Your replacement, Wolf, sent over termination paperwork last week. Said Marlowe was refocusing on domestic markets." His voice hardened. "After 8 years of partnership, we deserved more than a standard form letter." I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Victor, I'm no longer with the company, but something isn't right. Can you hold off on processing that termination?" "For you? 2 weeks, no more." "But Julian," he hesitated. "This man Wolf, when I questioned the termination, he implied that your departure was due to improprieties, financial mismanagement." The room seemed to tilt. He said, "What?" He was careful with his words. But the implication was clear. I didn't believe it, which is why I'm speaking with you now. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Damien wasn't just taking my job. He was systematically erasing my legacy, severing my professional relationships, and now apparently destroying my reputation. But why? Cutting ties with our biggest client would tank the company's value. It made no business sense unless that was exactly what he wanted. I opened my laptop again and started a new search. This time, I wasn't looking for Damien Wolf. I was looking for anyone matching his description who had been involved with failing companies, corporate takeovers, or financial frauds. Whatever game Damien was playing, it was bigger than stealing my corner office. And I was going to find out what it was before Marlowe Dynamics became his next victim. 3 days and sleepless nights later, my apartment looked like something from a crime thriller. Notes taped to walls, printouts scattered across surfaces, empty coffee cups everywhere. I'd called in favors from contacts across 4 continents. Each conversation revealed another piece of the puzzle that was Damien Wolf, or whatever his real name was. "Julian, you look terrible," Mira said during our video call. Dark circles ringed her eyes too. She'd been digging through recruitment databases for me. "Found anything?" She nodded grimly. "Your mystery man appears in executive searches 3 times in the last decade. Different names each time." She held up documents to her camera. James Whitmore at Apex Capital in 2019. Daniel Werner at Helix Investments in 2021. And most recently, Damien Wolf. Career progression. Rapid ascension each time. Joins mid-level, charms his way up, then disappears after about 18 months. always during a company restructuring or acquisition. I added the information to my wall. Criminal charges? None filed. But she hesitated. All three companies struggled after his departure. Apex filed for bankruptcy. Helix was acquired at a bargain price. I felt cold. This wasn't just about my job anymore. My phone rang. Victor from Zurich. Julian, I received the official termination. It's done. His voice was apologetic. But something else? Our legal team noticed the authorization signatures don't match previous documents. What are you saying, Victor? The signatures appear forged. We've requested verification, but I thought you should know. Also, 3 other European clients received similar terminations this week. After hanging up, I stared at my wall of evidence. Damien was systematically cutting off Marlowe Dynamics' international revenue streams. The company's stock would plummet when this became public. I needed more, something concrete that proved who he really was. A new email arrived from Beth. Found these in old background check archives. Someone tried to delete them from the server. Attached were photos of passports, 3 different names, all with Damien's face. The birth dates varied by 2 to 3 years each time. The countries of issue: United Kingdom, Canada, Australia. I was dealing with a professional identity thief. But what was his endgame? If he wanted to destroy Marlowe Dynamics, why get engaged to Alessandra? The answer hit me at 3 a.m. I bolted upright from my couch and frantically searched through financial news archives. There it was. In both previous companies, a holding company called Obsidian Partners had acquired substantial shares after the stock value plummeted. A quick search revealed nothing about Obsidian Partners except a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. A shell company, almost certainly. I needed to connect Damien to Obsidian. And I needed someone who had encountered him before. Using the names Mira had uncovered, I tracked down a woman in Chicago. Catherine Ellis, former CFO at Apex Capital, Damien's first known target. Her LinkedIn profile showed she had left the company abruptly, around the same time James Whitmore had disappeared. Finding her phone number took calling 5 former Apex employees. When I finally reached her, the line went silent after I mentioned James Whitmore. "How did you get this number?" Her voice was tight with fear. "Please," I said. "I think the same man is targeting my former company. He goes by Diane Wolf now." Another long pause. Then, "I have nothing to say about him." "Please, Catherine. He's engaged to the CEO's daughter. I think he's trying to tank the company value before a takeover." The sharp intake of breath told me I'd hit a nerve. "That's his pattern," she finally said, voice barely above a whisper. "He always targets wealthy families or family businesses, especially those with women in positions of power." What happened at Apex? He seduced the founder's daughter, manipulated her into giving him oversight of acquisition strategy. Within 6 months, he had terminated our most profitable accounts, citing strategic realignment. When the stock crashed, Obsidian Partners swooped in. My heart raced, and the founder's daughter? Left with nothing. The prenup she signed, his idea, claiming he wanted to prove his love wasn't about money, protected him completely. He disappeared the day after the acquisition closed, took his golden parachute, and vanished. Her voice hardened, but not before he drained her personal accounts, called it a banking error. By the time she realized what happened, he was gone. "Did you try to warn people? Go to the authorities?" Her bitter laugh answered before her words did. "With what proof?" Every document had legitimate signatures, forged, but perfect. Every decision went through proper channels. On paper, it looked like a series of bad business decisions, not fraud. She paused. "I filed a restraining order after he threatened me, but that's all I could do." I thanked her and promised to be careful. The next morning, I called Carmen. "I need to know if Alessandra and Damien have set a wedding date." 3 weeks from Saturday, she replied. "They're rushing at Aspen, Colorado. Private ceremony on a mountaintop. Why? And the prenup? Already signed." According to office gossip, he insisted on it, said he didn't want anyone thinking he was after her money. Just like at Apex, I needed access to Marlowe Dynamics systems to find concrete evidence connecting Damien to Obsidian Partners. But how? I'd been locked out, my credentials revoked. My phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "Board emergency meeting tomorrow. 3 European clients terminated contracts. Stock down 12% in pre-market trading. Directors demanding answers. Marcus Reynolds, the longest-serving board member and Richard Marlowe's oldest friend. I'd worked closely with him during the European expansion. I called the number. "Marcus, it's Julian. How bad is it?" "Worse than they're admitting," he said tersely. "Investors are getting nervous." Alessandra seems blindsided by the account terminations, claims they were strategic decisions, but I can tell she's out of her depth. He lowered his voice. "Something's wrong, Julian. Richard built this company for 40 years. It can't fall apart in 3 weeks." "I think I know what's happening," I said, "but I need access to prove it." The silence stretched for several seconds. "How soon can you come in?" he finally asked. "As a consultant, of course, to assess the situation." I looked at my wall of evidence, the fake credentials, the pattern of destruction, the shell company waiting to pounce. "Tomorrow morning," I said. "And Marcus, don't tell anyone I'm coming." I had 3 weeks before the wedding. 3 weeks to expose Damien Wolf before he destroyed everything Richard Marlowe had built and took his daughter down with it. Walking back into Marlowe Dynamics felt like stepping into a parallel universe. The same building, same faces, but everything subtly wrong, like a dream where you can't quite place what's amiss until it's too late. The receptionist's smile faltered when she saw me. "Mr. Reynolds is expecting you," she said, sliding a visitor's badge across the counter. "Visitor." After 8 years of building this place, Marcus met me at the elevators, his handshake firm but his eyes wary. At 68, he'd been Richard Marlowe's closest advisor and friend for decades. Now he looked exhausted, the bags under his eyes telling of sleepless nights. "Thank you for coming," he muttered as we walked toward the conference rooms. "The official story is you're auditing our European strategy in light of recent developments. And unofficially, you're here because I don't know who else to trust." He stopped, checking that the hallway was empty. "Julian, we've lost 6 international accounts in 2 weeks. Our stock has dropped 18%. Investors are calling hourly. And Alessandra?" Marcus's mouth tightened. "Insists everything is under control. Claims it's part of a domestic refocusing strategy developed by her fiancé." Inside the small conference room, Marcus locked the door and handed me a laptop. "Temporary credentials, limited access, but it should get you into the strategy databases you built." I logged in immediately, navigating to the client contract archives. The termination notices to our European clients should be there, along with the authorization chains. "What exactly are we looking for?" Marcus asked, pacing behind me. "Proof that Damien Wolf isn't who he claims to be, and evidence that he's deliberately tanking the company value." The archives looked intact at first glance. But when I searched for the Zurich account documents, I found only a Armenin notice dated last week. The original contract, my crowning achievement, was gone. So were the renewal agreements I'd negotiated each year. "This isn't possible," I muttered, searching again. 8 years of documentation can't just disappear. But it had. Every contract with our European clients had been either deleted or replaced with simplified versions that coincidentally made termination painless and penalty-free. "Someone's erased our history," I said. "Look, the Berlin contract should be 60 pages with substantial exit penalties. This version is 12 pages with a 30-day no-penalty termination clause." Marcus leaned closer. "That's not the contract I remember approving." "Because it's not the real one." I navigated to the audit trail, a feature I'd decided on when designing the system. Every document change was logged with user credentials and timestamps. There it was. 2 weeks ago, a systematic purge and replacement of all major international contracts. The user ID, Dida Wolf Admin. He replaced legitimate contracts with versions that allow penalty-free termination, I explained. Then he terminated them, cutting off our international revenue almost overnight. Marcus looked pale. "Why would Alessandra allow this?" "I don't think she knows." I showed him the audit logs. These changes happened after hours, most from his private office. A gentle knock interrupted us. Carmen stood in the doorway, her expression grim. "You need to see this," she said, handing me a folder. "Legal just received it. They're panicking." Inside was a marriage certificate filing. Alessandra Marlowe and Damien Wolf, dated yesterday. "They moved up the wedding?" I asked, confused. Carmen shook her head. Not the ceremony, that's still in 3 weeks, but they legally married yesterday. Small civil ceremony, no announcement. Marcus grabbed the document, face ashen. This changes everything. With this, he has immediate legal access to her trust, the controlling shares of the company. I felt sick. Richard Marlowe had established a trust that gave his daughter control of 51% of Marlowe Dynamics. As her husband, Damien would have access to those assets. There's more, Carmen said quietly. The board received an acquisition offer this morning from a holding company called Obsidian Partners. My heart raced. How much? 40 cents on the dollar of our value 3 months ago. Marcus slumped into a chair. They'll never accept such a lowball offer. They might, I said grimly, if the alternative is bankruptcy. With our European revenue gone and stock in freefall, we have maybe 2 months of operating capital. Carmen handed me another document. This came to Alessandra's office an hour ago. Banking confirmation from Zurich. All accounts being transferred to a new financial institution. I scanned the document, then froze. This signature, I pulled out my phone, opening photos of the signature comparisons Victor had sent me. It's forged, but it's not Damien's work this time. I looked up at Carmen. It's Alessandra's signature he forged. The implication hit us all simultaneously. She's not part of it, Marcus whispered. She's another victim. Or a very good actor, Carmen countered. I walked to the window, watching employees rushing between meetings, unaware their company was being dismantled around them. There's only one way to find out. I turned back to Marcus. I need to speak with Alessandra. Alone. Marcus shook his head. Impossible. Damien never leaves her side these days. Then we need to separate them. I thought for a moment. When's the next board meeting? Tomorrow morning. Emergency session to discuss the acquisition offer. Perfect. I pulled out my phone. I need to make some calls, and I need complete access to the document servers. I need to find the original contracts. Carmen's eyes widened. You want to stop the acquisition? No, I said, determination hardening my voice. I want to stop the wedding. Because if they go through with that ceremony in Aspen, Damien walks away with millions while this company burns to the ground. Marcus stood, resolution replacing his earlier despair. What do you need from me? An invitation to tomorrow's board meeting, I said. And your word that when the time comes you'll back me up, no matter how ugly it gets. He nodded solemnly. Richard would do the same. As they left, I turned back to the laptop. Somewhere in these servers were the original contracts, the proof that Damien had deliberately sabotaged Marlowe Dynamics. If I could find them, I could expose him. But first, I needed to confirm one final suspicion. I opened a new search window and typed Obsidian Partners, beneficial ownership. If I was right, Damien wasn't just facilitating a takeover. He was the takeover. I spent the night in the conference room, combing through server backups and deleted files. By dawn, I had what I needed, the original contracts, recovered from an archived backup that Damien had missed in his purge. I also found emails between Damien and someone named Ake at Obsidian Partners discussing the Marlowe acquisition, months before Damien had even met Alessandra. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected place. Beth from HR had sent one final message before submitting her resignation. Damien's personal file, including his background check and the override Alessandra had supposedly signed. Comparing it with other documents bearing her signature, the forgery was obvious even to my untrained eye. As morning broke, I prepared for the board meeting. I hadn't slept, but adrenaline kept me sharp. This wasn't just about my career anymore. It was about justice, about stopping a predator who had done this before and would do it again if not exposed. The boardroom fell silent when I entered alongside Marcus. 10 pairs of eyes, the entire board of directors, stared in surprise. Alessandra's face tightened with displeasure. Beside her, Damien smiled politely, but his eyes were calculating, assessing the threat. Mr. Reynolds, Alessandra said coolly. I wasn't aware consultants attended board meetings. This isn't just any consultant, Marcus replied. Julian has critical information regarding the Obsidian Partners offer. I took a seat as far from Damien as possible, plugging my laptop into the room's presentation system. Across the table, I caught a familiar face, Richard Marlowe himself, looking older and frailer than when I'd last seen him. His presence was unexpected. He had supposedly stepped away completely. "We have limited time," Damien interjected smoothly. "The Obsidian offer expires at noon, which gives us exactly 3 hours to discuss why this company is suddenly worth less than half its value 3 months ago," I replied, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. Richard Marlowe leaned forward. "My daughter says you've been let go, Julian. Why should we listen to you now?" Before I could answer, Damien cut in. "Mr. Marlowe, with all due respect, this is a waste of valuable time. The European market losses were unfortunate but necessary." "Necessary?" I interrupted, clicking to my first slide. "Let's talk about necessary." On the screen appeared the original Zurich contract alongside the altered version. The original contract with Helvetica Financial included a termination penalty of 12 million euros. The version currently in our system, modified 2 weeks ago by Mr. Wolf, contains no such penalty. Murmurs rippled through the room. Alessandra's brow furrowed as she studied the documents. "That's not possible," she said. "I reviewed all contract changes personally." "Did you?" I clicked to the next slide, her forged signature on the override documents. "Because these aren't your signatures." The room went deadly quiet. Damien's smile never faltered, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "These are serious accusations," he said smoothly. "Perhaps Mr. Porter is bitter about his reassignment." "This isn't about me," I turned to the board. "This is about a systematic attempt to devalue Marlowe Dynamics for the benefit of Obsidian partners." I clicked again, revealing the emails between Damien and his Obsidian contact. Emails that predated his relationship with Alessandra by 3 months. Richard Marlowe's face had gone pale. "Alessandra, is this true?" She looked confused, staring at the documents on screen. These contracts are different from what I approved." "Because you never saw the real ones," I said gently. "Just like you never authorized his access to the trust assets." Her head snapped up. "What are you talking about? The trust is protected until after the wedding." Marcus slid a document across the table. "The marriage certificate. You're already legally married, Alessandra. As of yesterday." The color drained from her face. "That's not possible. We filed paperwork, but the ceremony is in 3 weeks." "The filing was the legal marriage," I explained. "The ceremony in Aspen is just for show." Damien finally spoke, his voice level but eyes cold. "This is absurd. Alessandra and I filed preliminary paperwork only. The legal marriage occurs at the ceremony." "That's not what this says," Marcus countered, pointing to the document. Alessandra grabbed the certificate, her hands trembling. "This isn't right. This says," her voice faltered, "this says we're legally married as of yesterday." She turned to Damien. "You told me these were just preparatory documents." For the first time, Damien's composure cracked. "Alessandra, darling, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. Like the misunderstandings at Apex Capital," I cut in, "or Helix Investments. Before you were Damien Wolf, you were James Whitmore and Daniel Werner." I clicked to show his passport photos with different names. Several board members gasped. Damien stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. Alessandra, we're leaving." But Richard Marlowe's voice stopped him. "Sit down, young man." The authority in his tone was absolute. "Nobody leaves until we get to the bottom of this." "There's nothing to get to the bottom of," Damien said, desperation edging into his voice. "This is a character assassination, orchestrated by a disgruntled former employee." "Then explain this." I projected a final document, banking records showing transfers from Marlowe Dynamics accounts to a shell company that traced back to Obsidian Partners. $2 million transferred yesterday using Alessandra's electronic signature, a signature logged from your private computer, not hers. Alessandra's face contorted with shock, then fury. "You did what?" "I can explain," Damien said, reaching for her hand. She recoiled. "Don't touch me." "Security is on their way," Marcus said quietly, his phone in hand, "and the FBI has been notified about the wire transfers." Damien's charm vanished instantly, replaced by cold calculation. He bolted for the door, shoving aside a board member who tried to block him. "Stop him!" Richard bellowed. I was already moving, chasing him down the hallway toward the elevators. Damien was faster, but I knew the building better. As he rounded a corner toward the executive elevator, I cut through a side office, emerging just as the elevator doors began to close. I lunged, jamming my shoulder between the doors. Pain shot through me, but adrenaline pushed it aside as I forced my way in. "It's over, Damien," I said, breathing hard. "Or whatever your real name is." His eyes were wild now, cornered. "You have no idea what you've done. I've stopped you from destroying this company." He lunged at me just as the elevator doors opened to the lobby where 4 security guards and 2 FBI agents waited. Within minutes, he was in handcuffs, his perfect facade shattered like glass. As they led him away, Alessandra appeared from the stairwell, her face tear-streaked but resolute. She watched in silence as the man she thought she loved was escorted from the building. "I never suspected," she whispered. "Not once." I said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like gloating. But as we stood there in the aftermath, I realized this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much bigger battle. 6 months after Damien Wolf's arrest, I stood at the window of my new office overlooking the bay. Not my old corner office at Marlowe Dynamics. Something better, something mine. The sign on the door read, Porter Strategic Consulting, and though the space was smaller, it was whole mine. No boards to answer to, no corporate drama to navigate, just honest work built on the reputation I'd earned over a decade. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Board meeting ended, proposal approved. She wants to meet." I smiled. Some ties couldn't be severed so easily. The aftermath of Damien's arrest had been messy, as these things always are. The press had a field day. Bride's corporate raider Fiancé, busted at boardroom showdown, made headlines for weeks. Marlowe Dynamics stock initially plummeted further when the scandal broke, but it slowly recovered as investor confidence returned. Legal proceedings against Damien, whose real name turned out to be Alexander Kessler, the mysterious AK from the emails, revealed a pattern dating back nearly 15 years. 8 companies, all family-owned, all targeted through relationships with family members in positions of power. His Obsidian Partners shell company had made millions acquiring devalued businesses, stripping their assets and disappearing before regulators caught on. The FBI found offshore accounts containing nearly $30 million. They also found his next target, a family-owned manufacturing conglomerate in Detroit, where he had already made contact with the CEO's son. My office door opened as Carmen, now my executive assistant and partner, ushered in Alessandra Marlowe. She looked different now. The entitled CEO's daughter was gone, replaced by someone with shadows under her eyes, but also a new strength in her posture. "Julian," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting me." "Of course," I gestured to the sitting area. "Coffee?" She nodded gratefully as Carmen brought in a tray. After Carmen left, closing the door behind her, Alessandra got straight to business. "The board approved your proposal. They want to engage your firm to oversee the rebuilding of our European division." I sipped my coffee. "I'm glad to hear it, but I'm curious, why did you support it? Last I checked, you weren't my biggest fan." She looked down at her cup. "I owe you an apology. Several, actually." "You don't." "I do," she insisted. "I was arrogant and insecure when I took over. I wanted to prove I wasn't just Richard Marlowe's daughter. And Damien, Alexander, whatever his name is, he saw that weakness and exploited it." She set down her cup, her hand trembling slightly. "He made me believe you were undermining me, that you resented taking direction from a woman half your age. He isolated me from everyone who could have warned me." The pain in her voice was raw, and I felt my lingering resentment soften. She had been manipulated by an Axter. "What happened wasn't your fault," I said quietly. She gave a bitter laugh. "Wasn't it? I fired the company's most valuable strategist because my fiancé suggested it. I signed papers without reading them. I almost destroyed my father's legacy because I was too proud to admit I needed help." I leaned forward. Alessandra, he'd done this before, multiple times. He knew exactly which buttons to push, which insecurities to exploit. She seemed to consider this, then straightened her shoulders. "Maybe, but that doesn't change my responsibility now." She pulled a folder from her bag. "Which is why I've made some changes." She handed me the document, a new corporate structure for Marlowe Dynamics. The CEO position was now shared between Alessandra and her father, with a clear succession plan outlined. "Dad's coming back, part-time," she explained. "I'm not ready to lead alone, not yet, and I'm appointing a new board with actual oversight powers." I scanned the document, impressed by its thoroughness. This is good work. I learned from my mistakes. She hesitated. Which brings me to the real reason I'm here. I don't just want your firm as consultants. I want you back, Julian. As Chief Strategy Officer, I blinked in surprise. You want me to come back? On your terms, she added quickly. Keep your consulting firm. Work for us part-time if that's what you prefer. Name your price. The offer was tempting. My position, my influence, my corner office, all restored, perhaps with even more power than before. But something didn't feel right. Why me? After everything that happened, her eyes met mine, unwavering. Because you could have destroyed me when you exposed Damien, but you didn't. You could have taken over when my father offered you the CEO position last month, but you declined. You've shown more integrity in failure than most people show in success. I hadn't known Richard had told her about his offer. I need someone who will tell me the truth, even when it hurts, she continued. Someone who knows the business better than anyone. Someone who's already proven they care about the company more than their ego. I looked around my modest office, the dream I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. Then back at the Marlowe Dynamics proposal, the easy path back to prestige and security. I appreciate the offer, I said finally, but I need to decline. She couldn't hide her disappointment. May I ask why? I smiled. Because sometimes the best way forward isn't going back. I built something here that matters to me, something on my terms. She nodded slowly. I understand. She rose to leave, then paused. Will your firm still consult on the European rebuild? Absolutely. But as partners, not subordinates. She extended her hand. Partners it is. As I walked her to the door, she turned one last time. You know what's ironic? Damien thought he was using me to destroy something valuable. Instead, he forced me to become someone stronger. Someone worthy of my father's legacy. After she left, I returned to my window. Across the bay, I could see the Marlowe Dynamics building, still standing, still thriving, despite everything. Just like both of us. My phone buzzed with a notification. The final ruling in Alexander Kessler's case. 20 years for fraud, forgery, and financial crimes. No parole. I closed the alert and opened my calendar instead. 3 new clients this month. A speaking engagement at my alma mater. Dinner with Carmen to discuss expanding the firm. Some people think losing everything means the end of your story. I'd learned it can be just the beginning.